Hey y'all, I'm back. This video is going to show you how to do a buttonhole on the Brother LX3817. So let me show you what all you're going to need first. You need the buttonhole foot, which looks like this, and it's got an A up at the top. You definitely need your button. You cannot make the buttonhole until you know what size you need to make it, and you need the button for that. This will come in handy. This is the little key that came with your machine. So you don't have to have it, but I'm going to show you how to adjust certain things if you have a problem with your buttonholes later. You need your handy dandy seam ripper for this. You know, I'm always telling you to put this way up because you don't need it. Well, this is one time you do need it. So go find that seam ripper and get that. You need something to measure your button with. I use this little guide. You know, you can get these for like $1 at Walmart, and this is the handiest little thing because you can slide this guide and it stays put so you can measure correctly all the way down. You need a piece of fabric. I have mine pressed and folded over just like you would have a placket on a shirt, because you must practice buttonholes. This is not something you can just do on your garment the first time. You're going to need to practice. A minimum of 10 buttonholes, I would say. So make sure you got plenty of bobbin and thread in your machine. And last but not least, you need some sort of writing utensil to draw your buttonhole. Now the LX3817, it does not have automatic buttonholes. It has a 4-step buttonhole. So you are going to have to tell it exactly what to do. It's not going to stop and start on its own. It's not going to move from one step to the other. A buttonhole has 4 sides. The 2 bar tacks at the top and the bottom, and then the left side and the right side. So the machine, that's the thing about a mechanical machine. It only does what you tell it to do. That's the best thing and that's the worst thing. So let me come around to the other side and we'll get started setting the machine up. First, let's attach the buttonhole foot. So you're going to press down and take your old foot off. Now this foot goes on the machine with the A to the back. So just slip it right under there so that the gap or the notch is right on top of the metal bar, and slip it down and let it click. Let me get the other side view of that. You can see that right here is a little notch in your foot. So with the A to the back, you're going to line that little notch right on top of the metal bar and snap it down and it will click on. Now we need, you see how my top thread is on top and my bobbin thread is, we need to pull both threads out in between here. So hold your top thread and with your hand turn the wheel and let the needle go down. Now don't pull it all the way out, because what we're going to do is now grab the bobbin thread, and I have blue on the bottom and red on the top. Grab the bottom thread and get something and put under there, pull the top thread under. So now I have both threads coming out in between the foot and the plate, and then you can pull them to the back. Now we need to prepare the fabric. So the first thing you got to do is measure your button. Now you can just kind of eyeball this if you want to. After you've had some practice, I do it a lot, but for now, let me show you the correct way to do it. You're going to measure your button, and like I said, I use this little gauge thing. I just like it because it stays. Now you want to give yourself a little bit of room on either end. The bar tack takes up some room, so I'm going to nudge it down just a little. So even though my button stops here, I've got a little bit of space here and a little bit of space between here. So this is the size that I want my buttonhole to be. Now you're going to draw it on your fabric. I just use a pencil and do it really lightly. There's all kinds of fabric markers if you want to use one of those, but I just use a pencil and I make a mark across the top and then another one across where the bottom's going to be. Okay. Normally I don't make mine this dark, but I want to be sure that you can see what all I'm doing. So this is how you mark your fabric for the buttonhole. All right, next you're going to push this foot so that this is all the way to the back. Just push this part all the way to the back. Now let's get the fabric under here. This is very important because when you set the fabric, that's good for the whole buttonhole. So you have to be sure that you get it in the right place. Now, what the buttonhole is going to do is first it's going to sew this bottom tack. Then it's going to sew backwards along this edge. Then it's going to sew this tack and then come back to the front. So this is what we're gearing up for. We want to align it so that this is where it starts sewing. So keep that in mind. There's a little tooth right there on the end of your buttonhole foot. So that needs to align with your straight line. Then you're going to try to get this bar tack even with these two little red dots on either side of this. Make sure you keep your foot pushed back. So get it under there, and you can see through this little window right here if you have the bottom bar tack right where it needs to be and that center bar tack aligned. You can see right through the window, that is my bottom bar tack mark right there. Okay, so at this point we have our fabric under the foot is down, so the fabric is secured. Check your edge, make sure that it's straight. Your edge here is straight with the side of your buttonhole, because this is how it's going to sew the buttonhole. And if you're wonkers with the edge of your fabric, then your buttonhole is going to come out sideways as well. All right, my threads are to the back, and my buttonhole foot is pushed all the way back. Now, let's go over to the settings. On our stitch selector dial, we're going to use all three of these stitches to make one buttonhole. You start here in the center with number 1. This is going to sew the bar tack across the bottom right here. Then we're going to turn it to B. That's going to sew the side. Then we're going to flip back to number 1. This is going to make the bar tack across the other end. And then we'll turn it around to D, and that will make the bar tack come right down here. It's pretty self-explanatory on the graphics. So let's go to number 1 and let's get back under the machine. And we're ready to go. I have it set on stitch selector number 1, which is in the middle of the 3 buttonholes. I have my fabric centered under there. My button foot is aligned. So I'm going to give it a little bit of juice there. Okay, just 4 or 5 stitches on this. Now, at this point, when you stop it, when I stopped this one, it's coming out of this right-hand side. Now, I know that my buttonhole is fixing to sew up the left-hand side. So what you want to do is turn your hand wheel one more time, sink it in that left-hand side, and then pull the needle back up. If your needle is in the fabric, then when you try to turn your stitch selector dial, it won't let you go to the next step. It's kind of locked in place. So now, without moving the fabric or anything like that, I'm just going to turn my stitch selector dial 1 space, and that's on B, and I'm ready to go the other direction. Now, you will have to be the one that stops this process. So be watching underneath your foot. You can see you know, if you look carefully, you'll be able to see where the end of your mark comes. So that's when you want to stop. So let's get, sometimes I go ahead and put my needle back in, and then and you're going to want to stop. You might have to turn the hand wheel one time. On this one, you're going to want the needle to come up out of the left hand side, the far side. Pull it up. Now I'm going to turn my stitch selector back to the center, back to number 1, and this is going to sew the bar tack. And I can see that I'm a little bit off the mark on my buttonhole. I actually think the buttonhole is straighter than what I marked, but it's kind of hard to do it with the camera in between you and the machine. So let's make this other bar tack, and maybe 5, 6. All right, now this time I want my last stitch to be coming out of the right hand side of that bar tack. So I'm going to turn the wheel and put the needle in and pull it back up. Then I'm going to turn my stitch selector to D. And wait until it goes right across that bottom bar tack. I like to sink my needle one more time into the center of the bar tack, okay? Then you're done. You can lift your foot out, and we'll pull this buttonhole out and see what it looks like. All right, looks like a nice buttonhole there. So let's finish this off. I'm going to clip my thread. This thread on the bottom here, that was where I started. That's the thread I started with, and it's been sewn over, so you can clip it close to the fabric. Then turn it over. What I like to try to do, doesn't always work, is I pull this, the last bobbin thread that I have, and it's not going to work this time. Sometimes it'll pull up a loop, and you can pull that through and knot it. This one is obviously secured well enough, so just clip it close. And then I can clip this other one close. And now we're ready to open up the buttonhole. So let me show you how to do that. Now we have our nice buttonhole. You're going to use your seam ripper. We need to cut the inside of this. Now this is a 2-step process. So what you need to do is puncture it just the inside of that bar tack, and watch the finger down here because this will go through it, and carefully slice halfway, just halfway. Then we're going to turn it around, and we're going to do the other half from the other direction. Okay? The reason I do it this way is because multiple times before I have started at one end thinking I would go all the way to the other end, and I have sliced through the end of my buttonhole. And that is a huge mess to fix. Sometimes you can ruin the whole garment. Well, I mean, you have to fix it somehow. Now you can see my button would go nicely through the hole. Okay? And that is how you do a buttonhole. Now let's talk about some of the problems that you might have and how you can fix those. I made a little sample here of different problems that you can have with your buttonholes. And if you'll notice, you can adjust the stitch width on the left-hand side of your buttonhole. The right-hand side, if you look at all 4 of these buttonholes right here, the right-hand side is the same for every single buttonhole. The left-hand side, like on the first one, that left-hand side is more open. And here, it's a lot more dense. Then I tried to get a little closer to being uniform on these two. So you cannot adjust the stitches on the right hand side, but you can adjust the stitches on the left hand side. And you do that right here. You see the little picture down here? It tells you that if you turn, and inside this little hole there's a flathead screw. That's why you need your little screwdriver. This little screwdriver will fit that flathead screw. And you can put this in there and turn it to the left or to the right. You just need to turn it by little tiny increments. Don't be, going at it, because a little bit of a twist makes a lot of difference. Now, on the first one that I did here, this was what it was when I went a quarter of a turn to the left. Then I went all the way back around to where it had been, straight up and down, and I turned it a quarter of a turn to the right. So that's the difference in the two. So just inch it along one way or the other. Now remember, you're only adjusting, you're trying to make the left-hand side match the right-hand side. So that's the goal. Well, that's all there is to doing buttonholes on the 3817. It's not impossible. It's not all that hard. But you do have to practice. Just practice. I would say, do a minimum of 10 buttonholes just on a scrap piece of fabric and play around with it. Then you'll be more comfortable with it. If I were trying to do a buttonhole my first time on a garment, I would rest assured that I'm fixing to mess up everything I've already done. And buttonholes are usually one of the last things you do, so you don't want to take a chance on messing that up. Different fabrics react differently, so practice on the fabric that you're fixing to put the buttonhole on. Now, you don't have to do 10 every time. I'm just saying right now, for a start, just sit down and do 10 buttonholes, and you'll get the hang of it. And I'll see you back here next time at Mom's Sewing Machine. Bye, y'all. Thank you for watching.